Jason Lewis was the first person to circumnavigate our planet, and he traveled only by manpower. So he cycled, he climbed, he used kayaks, and he swam. And at the end of his journey, he said, "We no longer live as our ancestors did, directly under the stars and the moon, experiencing the life-enchanting primal connection that we have with nature." This photo that you see is when I was in the highlands of Papua New Guinea in 2008. It was a fairly memorable day. We were out hunting a wild boar. And while we were hunting, it occurred to me that we're using all our senses. We're using sight, smell, sound. And once we reached about 200 meters within the range of the wild boar, two of the archers from the tribe diverged from the tribe, and they started crawling on their hands and knees as they approached this wild boar. And when they were about 20 to 30 meters in range, they fired a few arrows, and then the rest of the tribe came in and killed the animal. We carried the animal back home, skinned it, gutted it, and the women prepared the meal. And what I realized was, in that moment, the meat that I was eating was replenishing the energy that I'd spent hunting that day. The simple relationship between food and movement has been convoluted because today we have the supermarkets providing an abundance of food, but we don't move as much anymore. So this leaves another interesting paradox. We eat with guilt. And because we don't hunt, our movement has suddenly become obsolete. What do I use our bodies for? Today, movement is mass marketed by social media and so on. We find that we have an idealistic body image. And to do this in this time-poor environment, we use machines. These machines automate and linearize our movements, and our movements suddenly become mindless. And how much was the human body designed to move? Was it 2 hours a day, 3 times a week? Is that what the human body is capable of? Just the sheer fact that we're able to stand is an architectural masterpiece. Just standing on these 2 legs, my spine is perfectly balanced over my hips, and it's suspended using an interconnection of muscles. And to keep these muscles healthy, it's really important to do consistent movement. What we find in our static lives when we sit on chairs most of the day is these muscles weaken, and we find a condition called hyperkyphosis, which is just hunched back. And pulling your shoulders back and sitting up straight isn't really an improvement. It's simply a visual improvement. So what is required here is actually to strengthen these muscles. So find ways to move your spine: bend, invert, rotate, twist, balance. All these movements provide enough stimulation for our muscles to be able to move properly. And I found many cases where people have started doing this in the mid-60s with amazing results. I've seen 60-year-old hand balances. I've seen 60-year-old skateboarders. So age is only a number. We are as old as our spine. Today we walk with shoes. The shoes I'm wearing are actually barefoot shoes. From a very young age, by wearing shoes, we atrophy the muscles that are in our feet. The feet are very specialized structures. You can see from the diversity of movements it's capable of, from ballet dancing to rock climbing. But what's also very interesting is there's a lot of tactile sensitivity in the feet. This allows us to build a mental image of our immediate surround. This tactile information actually interacts with our visual information, causing anticipatory postural adjustments. So as we walk, the feedback from our feet adjusts our posture. When we wear shoes, this insulates the signals, so we no longer are able to use tactile sensitivity in our feet positioning, which makes us, miss a step or makes our feet more vulnerable to injury. So there's a trend towards going towards more barefoot shoes, but there's a big mistake going from running shoes that are cushioned to moving in barefoot because your feet hasn't had the time to adapt. So what I would recommend is when you're walking, keep your feet hip-width distance apart, point your toes forward, and as you walk, mold the shape of your feet to the ground. What's interesting is we are so focused on taking the next step that we forget the step that we're taking right now. So walking will heal your soul. Sitting. They say sitting has become one of the trends like smoking, but I actually think otherwise. I would ask, do you even sit, bro? Look at the chart. There's so many various positions that our bodies can sit in. Half of which, we don't even do in our daily lives. So because we sit on chairs all day, it's caused a tightening in our hips called hyperkyphosis. And this leads to lower back pain, shoulder, neck pain, and so on. And what's interesting is this move towards standing desks. Standing desk is, again, only a visual correction. You're still stuck in a stationary position. So what I would recommend is try an experiment. Try spending a day without furniture and see all the different positions that your body can go into. Like half of it we don't even explore. So sitting, I would say, is a lifestyle choice. Sleeping. Today we have the luxury of sleeping on body mapping mattresses. Quite an amazing technology. But we've forgotten how to sleep or move on a hard surface. Our body's ability to change its shape on a hard surface is quite an interesting thing for the spine, because the spine twists and turns. It has so many different articulations. When we don't use these different articulations, then we suffer from a phenomenon known as a fused spine. And then we're stuck in a very rigid position. The spine is highly segmented. It has the neck region, the thoracic, the lumbar, and the sacral. And all these can move independently. So I'll give you another exercise you can do. Try lying on a flat surface and find as many positions that you can do to change from lying on your back to lying on your chest. And instead of complicating this, try to look for effortlessness in your movement. And what you'll see is the more effortless your movement is, the more it feels like that you're sleeping or swimming on the floor. Do this 10 minutes before you go to bed, and it feels like you've had a full back massage when you wake up the next morning. Body schema is something we don't really have in our vocabulary. Do you remember times when there's a cold air blowing and the hairs on your arms rise up to trap the heat? It's like a blanket of heat trapped over your arms. This is to keep us warm. These sensory modulations are part of intelligence in our body known as the body schema. The body schema integrates our multi-sensory information as we move around in space. It includes the 5 common senses, which are sight, sound, smell, and so on. But there are far more senses in our body that is not recognized. 4 of them actually exist in the largest organ in our body, which is the skin. Stuff like thermoreception, pain reception, proprioception, which is my ability to close my eyes and still touch my nose, and tactile sensitivity. We've already talked about that. And we cannot neglect the development of our senses. One of the best ways to enrich our senses is to spend time in nature. Nature offers an aliveness that we are able to connect to emotionally. It's something that is perceived by our biological brains. This is something that makes the difference between patting a dog and, no offense, Jordan, patting a robot with an artificial intelligence. you can't really develop an emotional connection. So, I would really recommend, if you don't even have time to spend in nature, try doing your next meeting outdoors. See how it opens up your senses and opens up the mind. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi was the author of flow theory. He published 120 different publications on this topic, and he said the simplest way towards improving the quality of life is learn to control all your senses and the body. And we as humans are very interesting in that we have the capacity to become self-aware. And this self-awareness has led to self-dominance over our action and our instincts. But the ultimate act of self-dominance is actually to let it all go. So this is when time suddenly comes to a standstill. Your self-centric beliefs dissolve and you're powered by something that is far greater than yourselves. And this is often described as the flow state. Flow is often talked about as a buzzword. So is there any biological evidence to flow, or is it just random anecdotes? I spent 10 years of my life doing brain research. And after finishing my PhD, I was working for a investment company developing neurotechnology to improve the cognitive performance of people who worked in the stock market. Stuff like decision-making, pattern recognition, stress management. And what I found was all these brain training tools that we were developing was similar to what the fitness industry was doing, which was linearizing, automating, and making the tasks repetitive. It wasn't really brain training. And also what I realized was the frequency bands we were training in, beta frequency, alpha frequency, and so on, exist in the brain not in isolation, but they all coexist at the same time. And so the footage I'm about to show you next is developed by the Adam Gazzaley lab in the University of San Francisco. And it's a real-time walk through the brain. It shows you how intricately the brain is functioning with all the brain activity happening at the same time. It's very well color-coded, so when the signals are traveling through your brain, it's traveling through the white matter, which is in orange in the video. And all the different brain frequencies are red for alpha, blue for beta, and green for gamma. So let's have a walk through the brain in real time. Video is not playing. There you go. So what you see here is the right hemisphere of the brain. There's a lot of activity in the prefrontal cortex, mostly in the alpha range. Now it's going into gamma and beta. And as it twists around to the left hemisphere of the brain, what you see is more activity in the right hemisphere compared to the left hemisphere. Also, you can see there's more alpha and beta activity in the right prefrontal cortex, more alpha activity in the temporal cortex, which is behind the ears. So what's interesting is that when someone is in flow, all the brain networks work synergistically in a process called neural binding. And what it's doing is all your brain networks have integrated together. So this is what is known as the flow state. Our bodies actually crave flow. This is perhaps why so many of us are into action adventure sports, surfing, or other things such as dancing or playing music. It's the experience where our bodies are moving in perfect harmony with what the moment demands. Perhaps one of the best examples of self-dominance that I've come across is Alex Honnold. Alex is a free solo rock climber. He climbs without ropes. He climbs without any backup or protection. And when he's climbing, he says he doesn't plan. He doesn't have any hesitation or lack of confidence. He simply executes his movements through an empty mind. So what I'm about to show you next is another footage of Alex climbing a 500-meter cliff face. And This footage is from a place called El Centro Luminoso in Mexico. In December 31st, 1995, a young girl was born. Her name was Gabby Douglas. She was born into a very poor family. She had a single mom and 3 older siblings. And from a very young age, she had this relentless passion for gymnastics. So when she was 3, she started gymnastics school. And by the time she reached age 14, she had outgrown her home school, which was in Virginia Beach in the east coast of the US. And so she decided to go and train under a new coach, Liang Chao, who lived in Iowa, which is 2,000 kilometers away from her hometown. And she trained under Liang Chao for 2 years and qualified for the London Olympic Games in 2012. And when she was about 6 weeks before the Olympic Games, she was participating in the Visa World Championships. And she was still recovering from a hamstring injury, which meant that she performed very poorly. This completely demoralized her. And it got to the point where she decided to quit gymnastics. And so she went up to her coach and expressed her desperation. She said she had let him down and let his family down. And at that point, her coach said, "Would you like me to tell you the secret to gymnastics?" Hearing this, Gabby was actually angry. She was like, "Why are you telling me this now when I've been training under you for the last 2 years?" And his coach said, "You weren't ready then, but you're ready now." And this is what he said: "Forget everything that you have learned. You have no skill, you are the skill, and the flow state accesses every moment that has led to what you're doing right now." J.B. Campbell wrote in his book, Comedy of Justice, that a man possesses nothing certainly save a brief loan of his own body. The human body is actually the only asset that you have. Do you trust its instincts? Do you trust its passions? Do you trust its wildness? Or do you devalue it through self-induced captivity? Thank you.